Welcome to Hornbill TV's Beyond Headlines with Alnguli. The murder of 28-year-old Raja Raghuvanshi in Meghalaya weeks ago unleashed a series of disturbing social discourse across India. Now, if you are from any of our 8 sister states in the northeast, especially Meghalaya, you know that they fright you and they ate you for lunch and dinner as soon as the news of the murder emerged. Suddenly, the conversation went beyond criminal justice narratives. The conversation went straight for the color of your skin. Now the conversation around the murder became an unhinged racist discourse, and the people of the northeast states are not strangers to racism here. Now the events that followed the murder, everything that has happened so far, exposed a deep-rooted prejudice and fault lines in the story of India, ladies and gentlemen. Today we'll not be talking about the horrific dealings of this unhinged, cheating wife, Sonam Raghuvanshi, her lover, and her boyfriend, Raj Kushwaha, and their contract killers. What we'll be talking about is how the whole Chinky and the Chinese vilification and insults took center stage instead of the crime. Now, ever since the news of the murder broke, there had been many twists and turns that have marked the journey of the Meghalaya police. It has also marked the journey of lies and fairy tales of the killers and their accomplices. Unfortunately, it wasn't so much about the outrage against the crime that initially colored the anger of the people. It wasn't about the crime. It was the hidden racist spirit that emerged with violence from some people in India against people of the northeastern states. Now, the condemnation en masse against the people of the Northeast, especially Meghalaya in this case, was, to say the least, shameful. The insults and the racist comments actually became monumental validation for the 8 northeastern states. As we all know it, the people of the northeast states have often never felt at home in India. Again, how India's media houses, their newspapers and their television channels responded to the horrific crime that happened in Meghalaya, and how these news houses treated their stories only validated our feelings even more. The validation that India has historically treated the Northeast as a spare lending area and not really part of the country. In response to the murder, social media was flooded with inflammatory posts targeting the entire northeastern population, ladies and gentlemen. Hashtags on social media call for boycotts and stereotyping people from the region as anti-India. Now, there were actually people who had the audacity to say all that. Several prominent voices in India blame the incident on what they perceived as a pattern of hostility from northeast communities against mainland Indians. The tone of the national conversation rapidly became communal and xenophobic, targeting not the perpetrators of the crime, but targeting the northeastern states' entire ethnic communities. Nagas, Khasis, the Manipuris, Arunachalis, the Mizos, and of course, snake eaters, cannibals, savages, wild, uncivilized people. That's what we were called since the murder case emerged in the newspapers and the news media houses. Thankfully, as more information emerged and investigations by the Meghalaya police progressed, Raja Raghuvanshi's family issued a public clarification and an apology in this regard. Now, the family distanced themselves from the rising tide of hatred directed at the people of the Northeast, and they urged the public to refrain from painting an entire region with a broad brush. Thank you, but that apology may have been just too little, too late, even unnecessary. The damage had been done. The tragic incident and the explosive reactions that followed highlighted both the fragile state of inter-community relations in India and the dangerous ease with which public sentiments can be manipulated online. Some simply release their toxicity just because they think nobody can do or say anything because it's over the phone or the internet. Some just because they seem to have a problem with anyone from the Northeast, they just do it. You are not from Assam, Manipur, Meghalaya, Mizoram, or Nagaland, or Arunachal Pradesh, or Sikkim, Tripura. You are just a Chinese. You're a Chinky, you're a snake eater. That's what they called you after the murder case emerged. The apology from the victim's family somewhat tempered the damage, somewhat, a little bit, just maybe, but the case will also be yet just another point of reference for the people of the Northeast who continue to fight for a space, to fight for a voice they can call on their own, a place of their own in India's democratic and developmental discourse. So, in what way did Sonam Raghuvanshi's alleged act and crime inadvertently expose an undercurrent of prejudice and perceived racism, which many people from the Northeast in India have long experienced from mainland Indians? What were the ways the veiled hatred manifested? Here are some of the many ways the case illuminated the simmering, often veiled racist tendencies that most Northeastern peoples face. 1. Stereotyping and wholesale blaming. Soon after the murder was reported, Bedlam broke out across the internet. Individuals on the social media, local communities, and those from Madhya Pradesh and other parts of North India began associating the crime with the region's people rather than the individuals involved in the crime. Meghalaya, rather than the accused individuals, was being blamed. This kind of wholesale suspicion and stereotyping are a common form of racism that people from Northeast India often face across the country. When the findings of the authorities began emerging in the media, suddenly the tone changed. Raja Raghuvanshi's family publicly apologized to the Meghalaya police and the government, acknowledging that the image of the state had been unfairly tarnished. They should have waited for the police to say. Now, this admission itself is significant because it indirectly acknowledges that many people had initially and wrongly blamed the entire region or the state of Meghalaya for the actions of a few misguided individuals. You know, if you have never been to the Northeast, please visit Meghalaya, Nagaland, Mizoram, especially during the festive seasons. Strangers will offer you their food and homes, and they will not ask for payment. It's not some tourism scheme or some advertising tactics we use here. It's our culture, it's our education and our upbringing here. Yes, we certainly have crime. Northeast has a lot of crime cases too. We have crime. We have a lot of bad apples here too. Just as any other city and country in this world, from Delhi to Florida to Tokyo, have. But it's just that we are not what the Indian media constantly projects the Northeast peoples to be. Because of a few bad apples, insurgents, undergrounds, militants, bombs and guns, extortionists. Because of these people, we are painted criminals and Chinese and Chinky and everything. Yes, we have thieves and killers too, just like any other Indian states have. But just that doesn't mean that when we are bored, because there's no electricity or internet, we just go out and eat someone for fun. No. Just like in other places on earth, we have some bad apples too, but there are entire populations by the millions and millions in the Northeast who are wonderful, kind, and generous people. And these good apples represent the heart of the Northeast. 2. Public and media reactions reflected bias. The way the incident was initially framed in some of the social media stories and public discussions on websites, they reflected prejudiced assumptions about the people of the Northeast. There was no balance in there. There were veiled accusations and generalizations that suggested Meghalaya was unsafe or inherently hostile toward mainland Indians and all that. It was the same with Nagaland, and it continues to be so. Whenever something bad, whenever a bad news is reported from Nagaland, suddenly we are the villains. Bad place, unsafe places, insurgents, guns, boom, bang, dangerous place. The buzzwords suddenly appear: not safe to visit, dangerous place, risky situation, conflict, insurgency, guns. Now, the kind of languages that the Indian media use when describing people of the Northeast or their states or certain situation reflect a wider attitude of mistrust and alienation. This kind of attitude is often reflected in the tone of treatment in the stories about people from the Northeast that they often encounter when they travel or study or work in other parts of India. 3. Reversal of usual narratives. Interestingly, the honeymoon murder case reversed the usual narrative, often it's the Northeasterners who face discrimination, xenophobia and violence in mainland Indian cities. However, here, the murder of a North Indian man in a northeastern state led to a backlash, a rare moment when the Northeast people, they themselves face the kind of generalized blame which Northeasterners are regularly subjected to elsewhere in mainland Indian cities, Bangalore, Delhi. The quickness with which Meghalaya was vilified revealed just how thin the thread of national unity can sometimes be when layered with regional and racial bias. The fourth factor, misplaced nationalism and double standards. Now, when violence or crimes happen in Delhi or Mumbai or any other metro cities, the blame is rarely directed at the state or its people. That's one thing we should remember. However, in the case of Meghalaya, entire communities were painted with the same single brush. Now, this highlighted a double standard that stems from the perception that the North is still seen as others, not part of India, but others, and they are not fully integrated in the collective national consciousness. When the news broke, the National Commission for Women issued a notice to the Meghalaya authorities asking them to do their job. The job the police would do even without being told by any commission or agency. So I recall seeing a post on Facebook, the Shillong Times editor, Madam Patricia Mukim. She was angry at the commission for this. I support her entirely. Really, Northeast is still seen as others in the wider national discourse. Now, some people just seem to think Northeast is always the problem, and that's the problem. And that means if you're always blaming someone else, maybe you're just the problem. Fifth, a cry for recognition and respect. The case also drew attention to how Northeast India continues to be misunderstood and misrepresented here. The quick condemnation and suspicion directed at the people of Meghalaya served as a painful reminder to many Northeasterners that they are not often seen as part of the Indian mainstream society. Rather, the people of the region are seen as outsiders to be viewed with caution or suspicion, and that's what's been happening for a long time now. Now, Sonam Raghuvanshi made you look like the most evil Chinese Chinky ever in the eyes of Madhya Pradesh or whichever state you were from during the time. So, what are the social political factors that created that false personality about the people of the northeastern states as backward people, savage people, evil people, untrustworthy, criminal-minded and uncivilized people? What led to people thinking about the Northeast people like that? What are the reasons some Indians think we are like that? Reason number one, geographic and cultural isolation. The Northeast is geographically separated from the rest of India by the extremely narrow Siliguri corridor. Now, if you take a look at the image, then you will know why it's called the chicken snake. The narrow strip of land is what connects the 8 northeastern states to the teeming mass of humanity called India. Now, this physical distance has also found itself translated into emotional and political alienation for the region. It is true that the age of globalization during the 90s opened the world to developing Asian communities. But suddenly, literature, languages, and cultural education started making their way into our lives. More and more young people started traveling outside for studies and work. So this connection has given clarity to our sense of personhood and our identities as a people. That also means we desire a space where we are accepted for our belonging to the community, socially, politically, culturally. Unfortunately, most people from the mainland, especially those who are far from the circle of what I call deep thinking areas, seem to have a problem with Northeastern peoples. I have met and known a lot of people not from the Northeast. They don't care if you are from Meghalaya or Africa. Amazing people in India. But there are these chapris who look at you like you are going to give them some kind of a disease, and they treat you like one. So those types of people from mainland India, not the first types of Indians, the good ones, are the problem. Cultural, linguistic, and ethnic differences further deepen the disconnection here, making many in the mainland view Northeasterners as outsiders. Another factor that keeps our voice of the subcontinent's crowd is our underrepresentation. We do not have voices of authority in the media in the mainland. We have a lot of famous faces individually, but we have no Northeastern people running the show in the country's top media houses, newspapers, TV channels. That is why we figure low in the consciousness of the mainland's intellectual circles. Again, the Northeast people lack leaders in politics who have authority at a national level, who can draw attention, especially major attention when we really need a voice. Yes, there was a time we used to have for instance, the late P.S. Sangma, the father of the current Meghalaya Chief Minister, Mr. Conrad Sangma. He was perhaps the first of the big Northeast leaders who found a space in Indian politics, especially throughout the 90s and early 2000s. But the population of strong leaders nationally that represents our voice has yet to be. And if there ever has been leaders who can speak for us at a national level, it has not been consistent. Yes, we do have a few leaders from the Northeast now who have started to build a level of leverage in the recent years. The Congress leader, Mr. Gaurav Gogoi from Assam, and the Royal Scion from Tripura, Mr. Pradyot Barma. And we have one or two of them here and there, but it's not enough. Our voice is not really represented in the big platforms of the country. We don't have consistent, rich pedigree of leaders or achievers at a national level that can represent us and our voice. We just don't have enough faces to raise a stronger voice when it comes to issues related to the region as a whole. So Northeast issues rarely find sustained or prominent space in national media coverage too. Now take for instance, almost every media house in India was covering the Meghalaya honeymoon murder case. But well, during the time which media house was talking about this Dimasa girl from Assam who went missing in Delhi. The body of the 25-year-old woman was found in the Ganges. Nobody was talking about that. If it were not for social media users, the media houses in the metros in Delhi, Bangalore, they wouldn't have picked it up. So political representation at a central level for the Northeast is minimal. It has limiting influence on national narratives and even policy-making conversations. Now, as a result, when racism or violence occurs, it is either ignored or framed poorly in the media. Again, another reason why some people in India think we are inferior to them is a lack of legal and institutional support and voices. Although laws against racial discrimination exists, for example, the IPC sections 153A to 295A, for instance, enforcement is extremely weak, although there are laws. Victims often face apathy or ignorance from law enforcement agencies themselves who are unfamiliar with their concerns or with our identities. So many hesitate to file complaints due to the lack of trust in the justice system or for fear of further discrimination. And most Northeast people don't trust even, say, the Indian police stations in the mainland. Few of us really trust them. Another reason we have low visibility in the eyes of most Indians is our economic and educational dependence. That's something we should remember. Many Northeastern youths move to big cities, Delhi, Bangalore, Mumbai for work or study, but they're often in low power or insecure positions. Economic dependence makes them more vulnerable to abuse. They're less likely to protest openly for fear of losing their jobs, for instance, or losing housing or rent, for instance, or losing educational opportunities here. This projects them as weak and therefore easy to abuse or be disrespected in many ways in the mainland. It's psychological also, if we think about it. Another factor, internalized marginalization and silence. You know about abuse partners, for instance, who suffer wrongdoing and abuse because they are used to being abused all the time. that they absorb, they abuse and stay quiet because that's all they receive all the time. Abuse is all they get all the time, and they cannot expect anything more than abuse because that's what they have been getting all the time. So they keep quiet because they love that person. Even in real world societies, constant exposure to racism can lead to internalized feelings of inferiority or helplessness. You have to just accept it. That's what some people think. And some Northeastern people may avoid confrontation or public action, feeling it wouldn't really make any difference. That's also another reason. Some might even think this could make them targets instead. So they keep quiet. Now, the tendency toward inter-community confrontations in many tribal and indigenous cultures can also discourage vocal resistance in this regard. However, the most damaging reason why some people think Northeast isn't really big on stuff is this: fragmentation within ourselves, actually. Northeast states seem to have a higher level of rivalry and intolerance for each other than the Indian states have among themselves. I mean, frankly, anyone who has traveled from Nagaland, and I don't mean any disrespect here, anyone from Nagaland who has traveled through Katkati in Assam will know how you are treated. And I'm not saying everyone is like that, but we know the whole story there. The Northeast is home to approximately 200 ethnic groups, tribes, and languages. Internal divisions, communal rivalry, historical conflicts within the region, for example, between Nagaland and Assam, tensions, ethnic clashes in Manipur, these have reduced the ability for us to present a unified front on national issues. They look at us and say, hey, these guys are not united, so they're going to be very weak. We can do with them and tell them whatever we want them. This lack of cohesion weakens collective advocacy and pan-regional solidarity, which Northeast communities should be working on, really. Another factor they don't really see us up there is what you call consolidated stereotyping in pop culture and education. Now, the education system across India fails to properly include or explain the cultures, histories, and contributions of Northeastern states or its prominent people, for instance. Again, popular media often perpetuates exotism or misrepresents Northeastern peoples as people from insurgency areas or people who are overly westernized. So this reinforces bias even more, prejudices. But I will also add here, I think our youth in the big cities ought to also examine their life choices. The way we live, eat and drink or dress or behave are the first things people see. And based on that, people will decide our value. Not that it matters, but in life, in real life, social acceptance is also a very big positive asset. So all this stereotyping makes it hard for Northeastern people to be seen as equal citizens with those citizens in mainland India. So when conflicts happen, many people from other parts of India don't see racism as a serious issue. The murder of Raja Raghuvanshi, though an individual criminal act, inadvertently turned into a mirror reflecting long-standing racial and regional prejudices. It served as a wake-up call not only for how crimes are interpreted through racial and geographic lenses, but also for the need to build greater empathy, awareness, and unity across India's diverse regions and communities. Thank you for watching Hornbill TV. See you next time.